The WEF's Klaus Schwab recently addressed the World Government Summit, because he has barely any influence anyway. Some say that the WEF are working on schemes that could lead to social credit scoring, but they say they're not doing that. So who do you trust? The Lord God created 5.5 million wonders, and here you are. Here we are together on a journey of mutual awakening. We've got so much to talk about. It's Klaus Schwab, WEF stuff. You're going to love it. These new systems of social credit scoring where big companies are adjudicated and judged to be environmentally friendly and socially friendly in order to get better deals and better valuations. It's a fantastic story. It's right up your alley. You're going to love it. There's still a few tickets left for a few of my shows. There's a link in the description if you want to come. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to subscribe to my mailing list so I can stay in direct contact with you, just in case there is a big global conspiracy that shuts people down, which I don't know for sure if there is or not. You let me know in the comments below if you think there is. Now let's get into this story. You're going to love this because I know you love Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab, oh dear, I better just address a big summit. I don't have any influence. I don't like to pry.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
Seeing Klaus Schwab with his shaved head on a big screen, with that accent, I never think anything like, are you literally a supervillain from a parody of a Bond film?
It's my great honor to participate for the 8th time at this important meeting. Last November, in partnership with His Excellency Mohammed Al-Gargawi.
Who are these excellencies? He's talking, I think, to dignitaries and possibly royalty in Dubai, where this thing's taking place. So nothing to worry about there then.
We brought together 60 top intellectual thinkers here in Dubai to define a longer-term narrative to make the world more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable.
A more inclusive, more resilient world where you might have nothing, but by God, will you be happy?
I'm proud that the government of Dubai has been so foresighted in establishing a Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in cooperation with the World Economic Forum. The objective is to quickly recognize the potential of new technologies.
Yeah, like social credit scores and mandatory ID to go anywhere. Are you not somewhat concerned just by the existence of conferences of this nature? I don't want to be like a conspiracy theory fanboy, because I don't think we should just blindly assume that things are negative when there isn't evidence for it. But it appears to me that the accumulation, the congregation of these individuals, the places that they're from, the shared interest they have, the way that they're able to operate beyond the influence of national government, the way that they're able to seed their acolytes into government, that's something that Klaus Schwab talks about. And many of the ideas that you see spoken about in the World Economic Forum, at Davos, or affiliated publications end up as government policy, sometimes in ways that are eerily perspicacious, in particular the 2016 documentation that Microsoft published around digital ID. Eerily perspicacious.
As well as develop the necessary ethical and political frameworks around those new technologies to ensure that those technologies are human-centered and society-oriented.
Do you notice that Klaus Schwab is like a master of using innocuous and friendly-sounding language?
We're just going to establish a framework. We just want a little framework that if you try to get outside the edges of it, you get a little insy-tinsy electric shock.
And then another word they use is narrative, which is of course another word for story or theology or belief system. So they're creating a set of principles within you which you can operate, a story to which you have to conform, and really presenting it as if it's a rather friendly, helpful, mutually agreed upon set of principles. But who's at these conferences? Who's making these decisions? Where do they get their funding? By what means and methods do they evaluate what the edges of the frame are and what the points of the narratives are going to be? These words carry real meaning and real import. And if you look at what's happened in the last 20 years, in particular with regard to the industrial or technological revolutions that Schwab is describing there, we've seen monumental fundamental social change, many of which have been brought about by unique events. I'm of course referring to the pandemic, a unique, unprecedented event, but it brought about unprecedented regulation, unprecedented new legislation, unprecedented new technologies, unprecedented medicinal advance, and mandatory, in many cases, in some cases at least speculatively, mandatory advances. If you have a framework and a narrative, do you think that might influence how you respond if there's another pandemic, or how you might respond if there's a military conflict, and who's involved in that military conflict, and who might be able to sell weapons, and who might benefit from reconstruction? Having an established set of ideals that are achieved outside of any of our democracies, wherever you are in the world, these ideas are being centrally determined and then dispersed, even if it's not. Even if, like, Klaus Schwab is only one cat away from being a literal supervillain, even if it's just an intellectual think tank that disseminates its ideas through elected authority, but in so doing nullifies the will of ordinary people.
What is also needed is a summit like this one to go beyond crisis management and to look into constructive ways we can build our common future.
I want a common future. I want my own future. I want a future with my own community, with my own mates and pals and friends. I want to know that people out there are creating their own futures as well. Vast, limitless confederacies of tribes, sometimes cooperating, sometimes fully autonomous and independent, but not like a pyramid where you have to get the sweaty tricklings of Klaus Schwab and put it into your government.
What's wrong with my sweaty tricklings? I don't like to pry.
Our futures are intrinsically connected.
They certainly are intrinsically connected. You seem to know every single leader of every single government and every single head of every major corporation. How intricately connected do you want these things?
In conclusion, and despite all the challenges, we have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation, and which we can only fulfill through collaboration on a national and on a global level.
In a way, there's a degree of transparency here, isn't there? We want to create national and international collaboration. It's difficult to create that if you have balkanized, tribalized societies where every community is running itself, where the varying myriad, sometimes opposing views of different sets of people can be respectfully practiced autonomously in our own communities. That don't work if what you want is a centralized global state where individual freedom, collective communal freedom, local custom and tradition are sacrificed in order to create a one slick global economy. Now, I know they talk a lot about diversity and all that kind of stuff, but that diversity is only relevant if the diversity, cultural diversity and other forms of diversity don't get in the way of the economic interests that Klaus Schwab is pretty open about representing, because you can see who funds the World Economic Forum, you can see who attends the World Economic Forum. It's not like the cast is shameless, is it?
I wish you an impactful and successful meeting.
There he is there, Klaus Schwab, not having any influence over the World Government Summit, just up on a giant bloody great screen telling everybody what to do. When he talks about things like climate change, sustainability and a better world and a better future, you might wonder, as I do, how are those things evaluated? Well, now we can tell you. There's this thing called ESGs. It stands for Environmental and Social Governance. It's a kind of metric system by which corporations can be judged as good or bad and therefore more worthy of investment. Let me talk you through how it works. It's fascinating. The WEF support it, promote it. It's kind of like if you ran a sports league, you would get to decide what games and what teams are worthy of what points. Listen to this, you'll love it. ESG stands for Environmental, Social and Governance. An ESG score is a measurement of a company's level of sustainability. The calculation is based on many factors, and an ESG score can range from 0 to 100. It takes into account everything from their environmental impact to how they treat their employees in order to establish if they're meeting the best practices in these areas. Okay, so a big corporation gets an ESG based on, do they treat their employees well? Are they treating the environment well? Now, I know a lot of you might think, oh, climate change, it's a big hoax, it's a ruse or whatever. My personal belief is that we should treat the earth with love and respect respect that we should be absolutely responsible. As soon as there are responsible technologies available that prevent like plastic being in the bloody ocean and stuff like that, don't kick out a load of fumes, I'm down with that. I'm totally down. I don't mind what you believe, I don't mind, but that's what I believe. And in terms of how employees should be treated, well, we did a story recently about Amazon and how Amazon treat their workers and the appalling way in which they're being monitored, and the way that might even get worse and that they're not able to unionize, certainly not very easily. I think people that work places should have rights, should have a voice, should have a degree of control over their workspaces. Now, let's have a look at how these ESG scores play out and who gets really good ones. The result of the ESG score is then used by investors when deciding whether or not to invest in a certain company's shares. So there's actual monetary value. So sometimes when you see a big company that like makes electricity or cars or guns or something banging on about how they're saving the planet or how much they care about diverse folk from various races with different sexual persuasions, you might think, why are they doing this? What business is it of theirs? Hopefully they're doing it because they genuinely care about diverse ranges of people and people's rights to be who they are, which, by the way, I really care about and think is really, really important, that people are allowed to express themselves religiously, culturally, sexually, in consensual, safe, lovely ways. But these companies, it looks like, are incentivized monetarily to do that. Not just like, oh, let's be kind to one another. In addition, as more companies begin incorporating ESG into their business plans due to pressures from investors, some have seen improved performance as well as increased stock prices at the time of IPO, which is initial public offering, which I've known for ages. So how does this ESG metric system of deciding who are the loveliest, fluffiest, friendliest, kindliest companies in the world get determined? Well, this is from the WEF's own website. The global challenges amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic, yeah, thanks for that, have made environmental, social and governance issues even more pressing for policymakers, boards and executives. Policymakers, that's the government. Who are those policymakers again? What, the government? Yes, Justin, all of my little friends. To promote alignment among existing ESG frameworks, the World Economic Forum, with partners including Deloitte, EY, KPMG and PwC, has drawn upon existing frameworks and identified a set of universal disclosures, the Stakeholder Capitalism metrics. A lot of information there, but it seems like some powerful groups have come together to create a new way of awarding companies for being compliant or observing an agenda that they appear to be collaborating in the construction of. During the Sustainable Development Impact Summit 2021, the forum announced that over 50 companies have begun including the Stakeholder Capitalism ESG reporting metrics in their mainstream materials, including annual reports and sustainability reports. So already we're seeing the emergence of a sanctioned group that cooperate and share an ideology. Now, if that ideology truly is about making sure a diverse range of people get opportunities, I'm all for it. If it really is about protect the planet, then I'm all for it. But we'll be able to measure that, won't we, when we see what kind of companies are benefiting from high ESG scores, right? This is Marion Smith, CEO of the Common Sense Society. First things first, it's the Common Sense Society. Do we need a CEO? I think so. It's just common sense. I'll do it. Thank you, Marion. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink wants you to know that investing based on environmental, social and corporate governance factors, what is now known as ESGs, isn't woke. That claim, made in his annual letter to CEOs on January 18th, is debatable. What's not debatable is that the global leader in asset management takes a hypocritical approach to ESG, as do countless similarly minded companies. They tout their work to save the world while investing heavily in perhaps the world's worst violator of environmental, social and corporate governance standards, China. So already we can see that there's a degree of hypocrisy, that these ESGs might amount to a badge you can stick on your corporate body to distract people from what you actually do. i.e., if what you really cared about was human rights, diversity issues and the protection of the environment, you wouldn't see loads of investment in China where there are some challenges in those areas, I understand. BlackRock, which manages a staggering $10 trillion in assets, has been extremely bullish on China. Last year, it recommended that investors triple their exposure to Chinese assets, a move that is likely driving huge sums of money into the country's economy. Okay, because if BlackRock have that amount of wedge and they make those kind of recommendations, it's going to influence China's economy. I got it. It also recently launched Chinese-based mutual funds, the first of which swiftly raised more than $1 billion. And BlackRock is hardly alone. From Vanguard to Fidelity to many others, American investment firms are piling into China. Now, those of you that saw those Chinese whaling towers in that video that went around and we did an episode on will recognize that there's possibly some human rights things that need to be discussed in China. We also know that there are some minority groups that are persecuted over there. That's not to mention the environmental stuff. All of these things are significant, but not significant when it comes to making money, which I accept, in the world of BlackRock and Vanguard is an absolute priority. Similarly, American companies that profess fealty to ESG ideals, such as Nike and Apple, depend on Chinese factories and supply chains to a dangerous degree. I think that most of us believe that the world is sacred, special, beautiful, worthy of protection. Certainly we must become conscious around how we treat the planet. I reckon all of us believe that people, no matter what their racial identity, their sexual identity, religious identity, ought to be allowed to be who they are. What I reckon many of us are antagonised by is when companies like Nike or Apple or whoever wear all those badges and colours when really, in practice, they don't actually act in accordance with those principles. You or me or anyone else, hey, say the right words, do the right stuff. And I'll tell you what, if I recognised that a word was hurtful to someone, I've got no problem not using that word. But I think what's also very, very important is ensuring that powerful corporations, systems of awarding points that are going to play out in the world of finance are behaving responsibly, transparently, and not just finding new ways to make profit and mask their true intentions. It seems what's being created on a global scale is a system where you will be rewarded, or your corporation will be rewarded, as long as it plays by the sanctioned rules of these centrally agreed upon principles, even if in actuality you don't care a toss about the environment or trans rights or racial equality or all of these issues that I believe are very important. Then if all these companies are playing by the same rules, then do you think that the people that are creating the rule book have some power, some influence, perhaps at a level that goes beyond democratically elected governments? Given these companies' stated commitment to ESG, you might think that China is an environmental, social and corporate governance paradise. Obviously, it is not. Start with environmental concerns. How can one claim to be addressing climate change by investing in the world's worst emitter by far of greenhouse gases? How does a country that strip mines whole regions for rare earth metals get a massive influx of money from green conscious investors? Yeah, it doesn't make sense, does it? Well, it seems to me that what the ESGs are is the electricity that lights the lamps of virtual signalling. China has been called an environmental catastrophe for a reason, and one that is likely to worsen given the regime's emphasis on endless economic growth. The social situation is equally concerning. BlackRock and other American financial institutions are heavily invested in companies that aid and abet China's domestic oppression, from surveillance system manufacturers to voice recognition software providers. Wow, so you're worried about deep state surveillance, you're worried about ubiquitous observation and spying. Well, this is where much of it is coming from. They are also in deep with companies tied to the Chinese military, an oppressive force within the country. Meanwhile, many American companies depend on parts or goods made with the help of forced labour. How can any company claim to support social progress when these are the circumstances? Only if those claims are underwritten by a centrally agreed upon set of ideals that really bear no relationship to reality. The transparency and accountability that ESG demands is, in the case of China's business, a mirage. It either doesn't exist or can be withdrawn at will by Chinese authorities. Such hypocrisy is stunning, yet it also points to the profound shortcomings of the current ESG system. Right, so there you go. A system has been established. It's an unreliable system. It's used to create investment opportunity and provides opportunities for virtual signalling and creates, in a sense, the pageantry, pomp and livery of a kind of meaningless spectacle that allows business as usual to continue under the guise of progressivism when actually all that's progressing is the pursuit of profit. Just to reiterate, personally, I believe that the environment is the most important issue there is, and the way that we treat one another is absolutely vital. And respect for groups that might not have traditional identities or religious ideologies that are in the dominator culture of the particular nation you're discussing about, these are vitally important subjects, if you ask me. And the idea that companies respect those ideas and pursue a righteous agenda in those areas, very, very important. But what I believe we have to be vigilant about is who is deciding that those companies are behaving in that way? What is that point system based upon? And are we sure that it can't be used to obfuscate the truth, provide opportunities for grandstanding and virtual signalling, while the companies actually behave in ways that are irresponsible both socially, economically and environmentally? That's what's interesting to me. Elsewhere, to show the potential hypocrisy and dubiousness of the ESG system, note this. Lockheed Martin, who I believe make missiles and bombs and stuff have a better social responsibility score than Tesla, a company that makes electric vehicles. Now, I'm sure Tesla's not a perfect organisation, but they're not literally firing cars into the air and blowing up weddings in foreign countries and saying, sorry, we're trying our hardest. I don't think they're doing that. And you'll be astonished to learn that the company reigning at the very top of the ESG scoring list is Microsoft, which I think was founded by Bill Gates, who has no connection in any globalist agenda. And to say that he does, in spite of the purchase of the farmland and the interest in all the medications, is a conspiracy theory. What if people spending money on stuff like to see a profit out of it? I don't know. Sounds pretty crazy to me. Anyway, that's all just what I think. Let me know what you think about this complex, baffling, dazzling, exciting issue in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one or this one. Remember to sign up to my mailing list so I can keep in constant contact with you. It's just a weekly bulletin as a matter of fact, but I tell you stuff that I wouldn't be able to tell you on here. And also I'll tell you about my live dates. There's a link in the description if you fancy seeing them. Stay free.